In the beginning, there was only formless chaos. With balance came heaven and earth.
If you're excited that Immortals Fenyx Rising's second slice of DLC will take you to an all-new location with an all-new protagonist, well, best to temper that enthusiasm. Myths of the Eastern Realm does indeed feature a different location and hero, but all new is a bit of a stretch. It's solid, but this 6 to 8 hour adventure is far too familiar to truly make an impact. Myths of the Eastern Realm is inspired by Chinese mythology and introduces us to a world that has been torn asunder. The balance between heaven and earth shattered and all the humans turned to clay. A mortal named Ku somehow survives and seeks out the aid of the goddess Nua, the original creator of all living things, in hopes that the damage can be undone.
All it requires is for the balance to be restored.
Ku is a likeable enough protagonist and is written with some levity, but I didn't find much to latch onto in the story, and the characters simply aren't strong enough to bolster it up.
Did you remember to say a cool catchphrase while fighting?
Goddess Nua's role, for instance, is essentially to mollycoddle Ku, to try and stop him from doing anything and then to scold him when he acts.
Why can't you just be safe and stay put?
This is absolutely not my idea of video game escapism, and far less fun than the more comedic roles the gods played in the main game.
By the gods, where did you come from?
Behind you? Does it matter?
Myths of the Eastern Realm certainly makes a strong visual impression, however. From almost any vantage point, you'll find a gorgeous vista to drink in. A patchwork of rocky cliffs and green fields, of temples and pagodas, of snaking rivers and flowering groves. It's an alluring open world, and made all the more so by the changes to the landscape as the time of day shifts. The aesthetics fit the mystical theme well, but getting around, fighting enemies, collecting resources and completing objectives feels exactly the same as it did in Fenyx's adventure. Ku has the same climbing and gliding ability set and the same implementation of Farsight. Ku's weapons, armor, stamina and health are all upgraded in the same way too. Sometimes with extremely familiar animations, while gathering ingredients to turn into potions is identical. Well, aside from the fact that you're collecting peaches instead of pomegranates. The enemies occupy the same roles too, whether they're the chimeric fae, which have tagged in for the Gorgons, or the winged beasts, which might as well be harpies for all the difference it makes. And then there are the many familiar variants of ethereal soldiers. See a shield, crash through it with a heavy axe attack, just like in Fenyx Rising. The puzzles are very similar to the base game too. Yes, having moving clouds instead of moving platforms does vary things a little, and yes, having crates that flip between large and small, or areas in which Ku can't use his stamina-based powers also creates new twists. But by and large, it's still all grounded in well-worn staples. Moving crates around to activate pressure switches or directing gusts of wind from point A to B simply isn't all that inspiring. Unlike Fenyx, Ku starts his adventure with almost all his skills upgraded. He's stringing together dodges, launching enemies, sprinting into attacks, and so on out of the gate. It's fun to hit the ground running, but it's a shame that there aren't new additions to these skill trees to vary the gameplay and make Ku play like a different character. The one new inclusion is the God Seal system, which ascends through 3 tiers as Ku fights, making his attacks faster and more aggressive, and opening up supercharged versions of 2 of his godly powers, Blades of Huang Di and Axe of Yan Di. Immortals players will recognise these as Ares' Wrath and Hephaestus' Hammer respectively, but this time they have unique upgrades to unlock. Despite this, the role they play in combat is essentially the same, and they're joined by Fenyx's other godly powers, which are also very much as I remember them. Despite its new setting, Myths of the Eastern Realm fails to distinguish itself from Fenyx's own Odyssey. Attractive as the Chinese-themed reskin may be, the combat, exploration, and puzzle-solving underneath is close to identical to what we've already played, and the characters aren't nearly as much fun.
Oh, stop it.
After spending 8 or so hours completing the story, I have little compulsion to come back and check off the remaining challenges, as unfortunately it feels like I've played it all before. For more reviews, check out our thoughts on Monster Hunter Rise and It Takes Two, and for everything else, stick with IGN.